Now, welcome back to the RUDIS Wrestling Podcast, episode 121 from the home office in Central Ohio. He's Matt Dernlan, Jason Bryant here from the wonderful frozen tundra of New Brighton, Minnesota. Matt, a lot of action to talk about. Of course, this episode, we're really going to be focusing in on the two big duels that really captivated the nation's attention this week, and they're both coming from the Big Ten. Friday night, number 1, number 2, Penn State versus Iowa, and then on Sunday, number 3, Ohio State, number 6, Nebraska. Both of them had a lot to talk about, and we're going to jump right into it here soon. And in case you're wondering what we're going to be discussing this week, yep, that. And, of course, the other duels will show up on our second episode this week. So, Matt, we just have to really just start right where the iron's hot. You know, Penn State, Iowa, that was what everybody was circling on their calendar. I made sure to find ways to watch that duel while I was away from home. I did make the trip down to Iowa City, but I tell you what, it did not disappoint in one bit from an excitement standpoint.
Oh, I mean, both these matches that we're really going to dig into deep today is like two of the best dual meets I've seen. And I know we're living in the moment, but hands down, the two best duels.
Love that recency bias,
so far.
don't we?
And
we love recency bias.
Yeah. But it really was. I mean, you couldn't have asked for a better script. And I would even say if you weren't even a wrestling fan and tuned into these matches this weekend, you would have been entertained because it was action nonstop. There were storylines, intrigue. I mean, it had everything that you want from great dual meets. It had everything possible, literally almost. I don't know what you could have added to the equation. It was just phenomenal.
Yeah, and of course, this time of year we get a couple of events like this. The chatter starts rumbling, and about every year we have a great dual meet, and every year there it is. It's like, why can't this be the national? It's like clockwork. We're not going to get into that today, but it was coming. And last week we saw it. This week we saw it, and we're going to keep seeing it as long as we're going to have big crowds, big dual meets, over 14,000 in Carver Hawkeye. Pretty good crowd out in Nebraska. Anytime you get in the 4 digits for wrestling is a good thing. We're going to see. I believe we're going to break 25 schools averaging over 1,000 fans this year. Last year it was 24. So anytime you get a loud and rowdy crowd, I mean, like Ohio State's got the Covelli Center where they're putting 4,000 people in there routinely. Even for lackluster duels, they're putting in some good crowds there. So again, Penn State, Iowa, everything what was expected, and then things that were also unexpected, and we'll get into that here in a second. Obviously, what was expected, Spencer Lee with bonus points over Brandon Meredith. You know, whether it's a fall, whether it's a tech fall, I don't think anybody expected this not to happen.
Yeah, I mean, that one followed script, and then we quickly went off script right after this. But 25, kind of anticipated everybody had 5 or 6 on the board for Iowa. It kind of held true to form, everything we thought. I mean, that's exactly, if you're Iowa, we talked about it last week, that's the start you needed. That's the start you expected, and that's the start you needed, and they got it. So, 5 points on the scoreboard real quick for the Hawkeyes. I did think for a second that Spencer Lee thought about extending the match a little bit and maybe giving him a better opportunity to possibly pin Meredith. But then I think you could see he made eye contact with Brands in the corner. It's like, okay, just finish the match. Let's get rolling.
Get your points. Get the point. Get the point. And we go 133, like you said. We went off script, and I remember looking at this going, okay, how many of you guys had this on Penn State's path to victory? It would have been, most people, I think, if they gave Roman Bravo Young the win here, it was looking at a decision, not a 6-pointer, regardless of how it ended up. It almost ended up a 6-pointer in the traditional fashion as he locked up 2 cradles. But injury default in this match has been analyzed and analyzed and analyzed. We've got slow motion. We've got GIFs, however you want to say it, in the Twitterverse. I mean, we're looking at things where everybody is now an expert in officiating and in safety in the rule book. So this is one of those types of events that kind of wrestling people can kind of get way out of their comfort zone and believe that they know more than they do. And sometimes you just have to ask the most simple question about why.
Right. And before we end, I think we have to spend a decent chunk of time here really breaking this down, because we have to unpack this stuff. I mean, there's discussion pieces here that we have to talk about. Before we get into that, though, I think we have to give credit to RBY. I mean, he looked phenomenal. The action was interrupted quite a bit, but when the action was going on, I mean, he looked phenomenal. And I don't think he's a guy that many people have talked about this year, because, the conversation has rightfully so steered towards Gross, Rivera moving up to 33. And in the way DeSanto has looked all year leading up to this match, the way he has looked, there hasn't been a ton of room for discussion when it takes place with RBY. And why is that? Because he really hasn't had the opportunity to wrestle a high level guy. This is his first opportunity to wrestle a guy of this caliber, because I think, anybody outside of the top four, it's not really in the conversation. I think we kind of know the four guys we're looking at, but of the four, he's probably the fourth guy in the chain that we've been talking about. And there hasn't been much opportunity to talk about RBY, but what we did see of him, I mean, we've talked about, Nick Lee's improvement this year and how he's progressed. We haven't really talked about RBY's progression, but he's definitely progressed. I mean, that was a pretty phenomenal performance, regardless of the circumstances.
And I'm curious from a coaching perspective, because, there's a lot of film analyzation these days, film, air quotes with what actual film is. But we've talked a lot about, or the wrestling community's talked a lot about DeSanto and how he gets out to there, he hits that dump and he gets those big points right off the bat. And, he picking up first period tech falls when he was a freshman at Drexel, kind of blowing people's minds. And, how the strategy is to prevent that. From a coaching perspective, did you see something that maybe perhaps Cale and those guys saw an opening and an exploitation into how DeSanto wrestles to maybe think that Roman Bravo Young has a chance to lock up those cradles? And I mean, he did it twice, so he must have seen something that kind of says, okay, here's my opening, and he nailed it twice. And at one point, there's the scream, there's the injury, the match doesn't progress, but you lock up two cradles on a guy that doesn't usually have near fall points scored against him is kind of an interesting thing to consider.
Yeah, there was definitely something there. I guess it would be better if I went back and actually broke down some tape of DeSanto to see what that opening was. But one of the adjustments I saw from RBY was the way he transitioned quickly through his finish, and that's kind of slowed him down in the other two matchups. They've gotten a lot of scramble positions. I thought RBY really blew through the finish quick, which is critical. But then when the way he exploded through the cradle, you don't see guys. I mean, he exploded through that cradle. Most guys, once they get their hands locked, they take their time to adjust and maybe cinch the chest, lower the level on their chest, then run it over. But he was running it over before his hands were even locked. He was running it over to lock his hands. And we can get into the technique that he actually used. I don't know because there's been a lot of discussion. Was this illegal? Was it potentially dangerous? What was the breakdown of the situation? I think we need to get into the situation to provide a better level of understanding because there wasn't really controversy here. If you're talking about the referee and what his responsibility was, but yeah, I'll let you jump in there, JB, and give your insight on that.
Yeah, because sometimes the most simple answer is by asking the most simple question: why was the match stopped? Well, I went and asked, and while the NCAA officials don't want to be quoted on these things, and I'm not going to quote the official here verbatim, but he is comfortable explaining, allowing me to explain the situation. He did not stop the match because of an illegal move. He stopped the match because he heard the athlete scream in pain. He said his first responsibility is the athlete. You'll probably ask any official, and they'll give you the same answer. Their primary responsibility is the safety of the athletes. The score comes naturally with the sport. So he wasn't even on the side of the suspicious pulling of the ankle or of the heel to even see that stop. So yelled out. Injury time ran out. Second time, there was a stoppage. You can kind of see DeSanto mouth over to his corner that he can't go. That point is moot because he was out of injury time. The moment he yelled, that was the second injury time. You had no more injury time. Match over. So there's a lot of extra discussion about a minute and 53 seconds of an injury default. I don't think I've ever heard an injury default looked at this much on Twitter or social media or just in general. But ultimately stopped the match because he yelled out, and that is wrestling refereeing 101. So everybody that wants to put all this emphasis on, well, this was it, this was here, this was here, this was here, this was here. That's not why he stopped the match. So don't even go into that analyzation of it because it didn't even matter. He stopped it because the athlete yelled out, and that's why he stopped it, and that's what you're supposed to do as an official. So, we want to talk about the nuances of the rule. I'm really not interested in that because it wasn't a factor. We want to put all this emphasis on this thing. Again, I'm going to say it one more time. Not a factor of why he stopped the match.
Yeah, I mean, it's black and white when it comes to the referee in this position. It's very clear cut. It is black and white. An athlete screams out, you have to stop the match. You are obligated. I mean, that's your responsibility. Like, he was just following protocol. Your injury time runs out. People are like, why didn't he go? Why didn't he go? He couldn't go. He used up his injury time. It's simple. It's black and white. So I think there's more to the discussion, but when it comes down to the referee and how he handled the situation, perfectly. He handled the situation perfectly. There was no other way but to call it the way he called it. So, I mean, yes, do we need to get into some of the other stuff? I think it's important because we're talking about, one of the athletes' where he was mentally in the situation.
And Tom Brands even talked about that in his post-event press conference, saying that he thought Austin DeSanto could have handled that situation a little better, maybe could have been calmer, and that perhaps we may have had 7 minutes. But again, one of the things that have been brought up is this is a guy that's never really been hurt before. So is it something like where, it's a freak out moment and oh no, like you stub your toe, oh my gosh, I broke my foot, one of those type of things. So again, he didn't wrestle against Michigan State on Sunday. So, the jury's out. We'll know whether or not we see him later in the schedule. But right now, there's so many different things to dive into. But I'm just going to sit there and say that this chapter's it's not going to be closed. I mean, some people look at this and say it doesn't count. Well, guess what? The match happened. It does count when we get to the Big Ten seeding. It's going to be a match that's looked at in terms of who won, who lost, because the match started. So again, getting into the mind of the athlete, I don't know. I think that's where the coaches are going to have to figure that out this week. But again, those are all things to consider. Was it because he's never been hurt before that we know of in terms, especially in college, or was it because there's always going to be people, oh, he's going to get pinned. Of course he's going to scream out. Well, okay, just whatever.
Yeah, I mean, so from a technical aspect, I do want to get into this because there has been so much discussion and so much talk about the position itself. And I think, Ben, I went back and I looked at the match again the following day. And then Ben Askren actually came out on social media and kind of broke down the position, which he did it perfectly. And I think if you want to go back and look at that, it's going to be hard to break down the situation on air because you actually need to physically see the situation. But the way that situation breaks down, if the guy, I know there's a lot of conversation, did RBY attack the heel? I think initially he grabbed the heel, but then he adjusted to the ankle to pull the ankle to the outside. Now, he didn't pull the heel. If he stayed on the heel, and hopefully I don't confuse this too much, if you're at the heel and you pull the heel to the outside, what that does, it essentially locks the hip out. And that's where it should be potentially dangerous. However, if you adjust to the ankle, if you pull the ankle to the outside, the knee's going to pop up. And that's what RBY was doing to set up the cradle. He pulled the ankle out so the knee would flare out. When the knee flared out, he attacked into the cradle and did that twice seamlessly. So I don't think there was, sorry, I just had an in-studio accident. I spilled my water. Fortunately, it was water, so I'm not scalded or anything. I've just I got water all over me. So back to where I was. So he was actually setting this. This is something you were asking about, the technical breakdown of what RBY was looking for. I think he was looking exactly for this. He was looking to get Austin to flare his knee out to attack the cradle. So that was the opening. Now, I know there's a lot of discussion because I think we've seen this situation and it can be dangerous. And number one, I do think DeSanto did tweak his knee. I think something happened. I don't think it was just a phantom injury. And to your point, I think it's a great point. When you've never been injured before, especially if you hear a pop or something in your knee, and a lot of times the pop isn't as bad as you think it's going to be, but in the moment, especially with the emotion on the line, the environment you're in, it can definitely play. It can affect your mind. But I will have to say, I do think that DeSanto tapped out of this match. I do. I do. And I know that's a big thing to say, but I've talked to enough people, other coaching buddies of mine were watching the same thing. I've been in those situations. I've seen the best, just like Austin DeSanto, the best guys in the country have emotions get the better of them in certain situations. I've seen this, and I think it's probably more heightened with DeSanto because there's been some matches in the past where we've seen emotion like this, and we even discussed this last week. And I complimented DeSanto on his mental maturity. That's where I've been most impressed with him. And it just seems like he just reverted back to kind of the Drexel DeSanto and maybe the early Hawkeye days of DeSanto. And I thought he really did a good job maturing this year, but it just seemed like he got in this situation where emotion factored into the equation, and he got out of sorts.
Yeah, I think that's probably the most subjective opinion that's out there. I mean, because there's people get that all the time. And that's one opinion. Looking at it, if you're a Hawkeye hater, yeah, that seemed to maybe be a perspective that can be shared with your perspective. If you're not a Hawkeye hater and you're a Hawk fan, be like, oh, you're gonna ignite the hornet's nest with that. I really don't know. I mean, I can get both perspectives here. I realize I'm not really gonna go out on a limb with my perspective on that take of it, but hey, I mean, it's the situation is what it is. I hate to use a cliche like that because I really don't have that perspective on, do I think he tapped out? I don't know. I'm not the coach. I haven't had athletes do it. So that's where, the
and I
perspective
do.
there
And
you've got a little different than mine.
Yeah, and I know it's not even going out on a limb. I've seen the situation. I saw what was going on in the match, and in my mind, I thought I heard someone say, one of the rankers out there say that he wasn't going to take this match into consideration, and I think that's a mistake. This is a win by RBY. Anybody that watched,
this is why I'm glad I don't do rankings anymore either. I don't have to deal with that.
If you watch that match with an objective eye, and I'm trying to be objective here, that was a win by RBY. I know it was an injury default, and I think you have to look at the situation and not look at just the box score saying injury default, because typically injury default, I would exclude that. But in this situation, the way the action that we did see heavily favored RBY. And to say that a match didn't really take place because it ended in an injury in this situation, I would chalk this up, victory RBY. And I would bump him up in the rankings.
What's going to happen in the rankings, the dual meets? One thing we're going to know is Iowa's going to stay number one. Things that didn't really change was it 141, 149, 157 pounds. These kind of were business as usual, almost as we expected. Nick Lee got a tech. I thought he had a major. Pat Lugo, again, a 6-1 decision. Caleb Young, a 6-1 decision. Two matches that we thought, I honestly didn't think these were going to be bonus situations for Lugo and Young, but they were convincing victories that were on the fringe of bonus, maybe attack more in the third period or late second period to get that bonus point. But I mean, 141, 149, 157, I don't think there's a whole lot really to dive into here other than, Nick Lee nearly got a fall against a quality reserve like Carter Happel. No, we did not see Jaden Ironman, in case you're wondering. Yes, all that chatter about him actually being in the Iowa student directory. The guy hadn't even certified as of Friday night. So it's not like, you can't step on the mat in college wrestling if you haven't even certified yet. So he hadn't even certified as of match time. So let's
and I think we should jump into that a little bit, because I think everybody wants to see that, right? Everybody wants to see that move. And especially after Friday night, right? When there's more, when the title's
that's the
more
discussion
in play than we
point,
thought
not,
it was going to be.
How did Carter Happel avoid getting pinned by Nick Lee? I mean, that's to me. But yeah, I mean, that's one of those things where, okay, is Ironman going to wrestle? Is Ironman going to wrestle? He didn't certify. Come on, you can't. Let's just.
He didn't certify, number one, and number two, this is the other thing that people aren't factoring. I don't think he was enrolled in classes at all last semester. So
somebody, and I can't speak for the legitimacy of this claim about the add drop date for the University of Iowa. Perhaps somebody can chime in on that and let us know if that was accurate, if this was the add drop range for the second semester. I mean, this is pretty late in January at the time, so Usually, I know I was on the fringe of those ad drops in my college career. Like, okay, I'm going to do well. All right, when can I drop this thing now? All right, cool. Yeah, I knew the ad drop deadline. So in this case, that's one thing that's the question mark to look at, and I don't really think it's from this match. I like I said, I didn't see it happening. I still don't see it happening. But now, I don't know. Depends on how legit that injury is with Austin DeSanto. Ooh, this changes my opinion slightly.
Right. And I think the conversation is the if Ironman could even be eligible to compete, because what I was saying before, if he wasn't in classes last semester, it would be interesting to see what his progress towards his degree will be, because most people just think it's straight eligibility. Is your GPA high enough to compete or not? Which is typically around a 2.0. But there's other eligibility standards that athletes have to meet every semester that they're actually competing in college, and that's called progress towards his degree. And typically a lot of athletes enroll in the minimum of 12 hours. And so if you're only enrolled in 12 hours throughout your college career and you take a semester off, it's very hard to meet progress towards degree. So I don't even know if technically, even if he is enrolled in classes right now, if he's even eligible based upon, his academic history. And again, this is something I'm not privy to. I don't know, but it is one of those things where people are like, oh, he transferred to Iowa, he's enrolled in classes, he can wrestle. It's not as simple as that. There's
the
more layers to
of the
this.
rivalry between Alex Marinelli and Vincenzo Joseph just keep getting better. I mean, how many times? I mean, I think again, I'm gonna throw a note out there that I saw on Twitter. Is like, how many times have you seen this level of elite athletes, or these level of two elite athletes go back and forth, and there's near fall points every single time they wrestle. It's crazy. Like, I mean, this is one too that set the stage. I mean, the path to Penn State victory. Here's Vincenzo Joseph knocking off Marinelli the first time he'd had a loss in his dual meet career and in Carver Hawkeye, in a fantastic bout. I mean, I just want to see these guys wrestle every single week, because somebody's going to get put on their back. And Matt, you've got an interesting perspective on the whole near fall point situation here with this bout.
Yeah. So, I mean, it was interesting. I thought Marinelli actually forced the situation. To say they should avoid going upper body, throw that out the window. They're both going up top, and
Everybody wants to see that.
Yeah.
Everybody wants to see the body lock and inside trip, and which one's going to get the better position. Because for those guys, that's a 50-50 position, because Vincenzo doesn't think it's 50-50. He knows he's probably better than 75% in that position. And I think Marinelli's going to have the same mindset. It's like, oh, watch this. You think you're going to do this? I'm good here too. And it's just, it's that bull in the china shop meets bull in the china shop. And it's like, okay, who's going to crash that last glass on the thing? Well, I don't know if that's even a saying or not, but it was one of those things where I'm just watching it and I'm just like, and the first thing that came out of my mouth other than holy crap was, this is awesome. And like I said, and I'm coming from a position where I don't care who wins. So now I'm like, okay, what's going to happen now? What's going to happen now? And the whole duel had me on the edge of my seat. And I was like explaining the match to my wife as I went, because we don't have a chance to actually sit and watch a duel together a whole lot. And she was getting into it. I had it on the TV in the restaurant we were at, and there was a growing group of people that were starting to really pay attention to this match. And then when boom, he hits his back, the place went nuts. And I don't think anybody there was a Hawkeye fan or a Penn State fan. So again, that type of situation, this makes wrestling fun to watch. You got two guys that are of high level and high ability going, I've got your best. Well, here's my best. And then, let it fly. That I can't talk about how exciting these next two matches were in the whole scope of this dual meet, because it really made my night as a wrestling fan.
Oh, and the pendulum shifted so dramatically in between those two matches, from the point of like Penn State's going to win the duel to, 10 minutes later, it's like, oh, the outcome's in question again. But yeah, this is must-see wrestling. Like I'm like you, JB. I could watch this match every single week between these two guys, because it's two supremely confident guys who are willing to just throw it out there. I mean, Ben and I used to call these guys are gunslingers. They have no conscience. They're going to shoot, and if they get shot, so be it. But most of the time they're like, I'm going to be the one that wins the draw. When we're on this shootout, I'm going to be the one that wins it. What I think that Marinelli did, one technical mistake he made. And again, I think he tried to bait. Joseph into inside tripping him. And I'll give Joseph some maturity here for saying, okay, fool me once. They'll would say, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. Well, he's tried to inside trip Marinelli a couple times, and it hasn't worked out well. So he made that adjustment. Marinelli, rightfully so. I mean, we've never seen Joseph shy away from an inside trip. This is the first time that I've seen him actually shy away from the inside trip, and he made a great adjustment. We're talking about adjustments that RBY made. Maybe this was an adjustment that Penn State made. Is like, he is going to try and bait you, force you into an inside trip. When he does this, you go for the lat drop. And that was a beauty, wasn't it? I mean, that was a clinic.
As somebody who got thrown around quite a bit in my high school wrestling room, it kind of brought back some really bad memories, even though they were 20-something years ago. So again, I mean, the mindset of a wrestler and knowing where you're strong and where they're strong. I mean, it was just again, I'm taking the I don't care. I'm just looking at it as a fan, and it was just to know that the history between these two, and then to see that type of scenario unfold, and then from left field comes something that you don't really. I mean, Chenzo's put people on his back, a ton of times. I don't know how many times I've really seen him as a thrower, so to speak. So that's one of those things like. The fact that he ended up put Marinelli on his back is not surprising. It was the manner and how he did it. And again, that goes to your point about, Marinelli, is he baiting him, waiting for that scenario that's unfolded twice before, the going to the well one too many times, the fool me once, fool me three times. I don't know if there is a 3 times adage on that, like you were just saying. So those are the things that was kind of more eye-opening. It wasn't the fact that he put him on his back. It was the manner in which he did it.
Right. And then, it was like almost the tale of two matches. And then after the 6-point move, it seemed to me that Joseph kind of pumped the brakes and kind of went into prevent mode, which opened the door for Marinelli to keep coming back. And then he reverses, he gets to the body lock. It was so close. I actually thought he was going to get a 2-2 on that last body lock. When Joseph just gave into it. He's like, I'm going to belly out. And all of a sudden he's like, oh crap, I can't belly out. But he was
jumped out of my chair on that one.
Holy
jumped
cow.
out of my chair on that one. My wife's like, what's going on? I was like, it's one of those things like you're almost speechless when you're watching it because it's such an awesome. I mean, again, the whole, like I said, between 165 and 174, I don't know if I had a legible sentence come out of my mouth while watching this thing. It was other than maybe you've got to be freaking kidding me. Holy crap. I mean, granted, I had a couple beers at the time, so I'm editing my my verbiage here for, not safe for work, whatever. Yeah, there were definitely some things where I'm just like, what? And then the table behind me, again, there had some youth hockey players that were in there watching it too, having no, not a care in the world about what wrestling was, but then they're more interested in watching how animated I am watching this, like jumping up and down. Like it was just, it was nuts. I mean, it was just, I can't really even put this into words on how awesome these last two bouts were. And where I was at in the place I'm watching this. And I know there were thousands of people in Carver that were feeling the same thing. There were thousands of people at home. We've seen the ratings from the Big Ten Network on how great they've been this year. Thousands and thousands of people watching this. And it was just, I'm getting off the tangent here for the bout just a little bit because these two bouts really epitomize what makes this rivalry and, duels in Carver when you've got Penn State and Iowa. Just, it really makes it that much better to watch as a fan. And I just, like I said, I'm raving about the whole duel top to bottom.
I mean, this is what wrestling is supposed to be. This is why people come. This is why people pay. Like these guys just literally threw the kitchen sink at each other. And all the analogies, all the descriptors we would throw out there normally that are just hyperbole. Like this is all true. I mean, was as good. I mean, it was blood, it was guts, literally blood, guts, everything.
God,
in this
yeah,
match.
they bled all over everybody. Yeah.
Jeez.
We got a bleeder. All right. Now, and thing is setting the table for, okay, here's Penn State's path to victory. Boom, another big one knocking off the bull. And then you've got, your guy who's sat there and he's won titles before. We were talking about Mark Hall needing to be a leader. And is it his time to really step up outside of the shadow of Nolf and Rutherford and Nickel and those guys? And Mike Kemmer, I said I was really, really interested in watching what he was going to be able to do. And like I said, he's been one of the most fun guys I've seen to watch at this new weight this year. And I to say I was shocked might be overstating it. To say I was surprised, probably leaning more towards surprised than not surprised. Because I'm not going to say, oh, I'm not surprised he beat Mark Hall. Yeah, I was surprised. I was curious on how he was going to be able to hang with Mark Hall. And I guess I'm not curious anymore. He's shown not only can he hang with Mark Hall, he can beat Mark Hall. So now this sets the stage for the Big Tens to be like, okay, it's not just Mark Hall's title anymore. At the Nationals, it's not just Mark Hall's title anymore. Michael Kemmer has made this a very, very interesting weight class. I mean, it was before, but now, the first period, there were some good scrambles there, but Kemmer just did not quit, man. He was, again, that was one of these things where it's just like, no way, did it again. I mean, just like so much fun to watch. And then, to kind of know he's coming off an injury, he's coming up 2 weights. He's got to go over Marinelli at 65, coming from 57. It's got a nice little dramatic edge to it. A Pennsylvania guy beating Penn State. We beat that up to a pulp last week. So again, one of these things that's just, as a wrestling fan, these last 2 bouts, I mean, these 2 matches are what made the dual meet for me.
Yeah, I mean, looking at Kemmer, it's similar, I think, similar in a lot of ways to RBY. There was the but behind the name, like RBY, but he hasn't really wrestled anybody yet this year. Kemmer's like, he's looked really good, but we really haven't seen him wrestle anyone of significance up 2 weight classes, like you said, and a year removed from competing. He's looked really, really good, and I think everybody out there is like, man, this guy is good, but can he compete with Hall? We didn't think so, because he just hasn't had the opportunity to compete on this stage this year against a caliber of opponent like Mark Hall. And he didn't just beat him. I mean, if I'm Penn State, and then this is where, I really want to compliment Kemmer before I dig into Hall, but he dominated him. I mean, I don't think we've seen anybody, even Valencia, have his way with Hall like Kemmer did. I mean, if I'm Penn State, I'm like, we got to go back to the drawing boards here. Like he did not have answers in certain situations, and we've never seen that from Hall, even against Valencia.
I've seen people get the Hall legs because Hall's got great hips. He's tremendously hard to score, and his defense and his counter offense are phenomenal. But again, to your point, I don't think I've seen that many people get to Mark Hall's legs with that degree of success multiple times. Which I think, okay, one, you can probably take, on your good days, you can take Mark Hall down once a match. That doesn't happen for a lot of people either. But just to see, just get in, and finish clean was, it was like, whoa.
And he looked, I know there's always been discussion about Mark Hall being undersized. He's not undersized. He's got a very dense body. People see him. He's not that tall. He's not that wide and is short, but his body is just packed in there. He is thick from his neck to his feet. He just compact and built in there. But Kemmer, just from a leverage standpoint, it seemed like a big advantage from a leverage standpoint over Hall, which I think he used to his advantage in certain situations. But yeah, just a complete dominant performance by Kemmer. It'll be interesting to see when they run it back at Big Tens what the second go around looks like, because there's definitely going to be some adjustments going on. Now, if you wouldn't mind, I actually want to get into Hall, because, I'm always, when I'm watching matches, a lot of times I'm watching the wrestling action, but I'm also watching, the guys on the bench, what's going on, what's the body language on the bench? How's the interaction going on with the team? And, I'm not going to say this, for sure, but it seemed to me after Joseph won, I think Penn State was like thinking, we've got this. There's no way Hall's going to lose. And I don't think Hall thought there's a way he was going to lose, to the point where I noticed that Hall was actually engaging with the Iowa fans behind the bench right before his match. And I'm like, whoa. What are you doing, man? What are you doing? You got to go out and compete. He's turned around. He's chirping at the fans. I don't know if you noticed that at all, but
it was kind of hard from my vantage point watching on television. But that's one fan base you do not want to chirp with at home, ever. ever. Okay, you could sit there and like, if you're a couple matches away, you could sit there on the bench, crack a smile, and be like, okay, yeah, that's funny. No, no, especially when you're. That is a very unforgiving home crowd, and every fan base. And I'm not going to put every Iowa fan in this bubble. So before you even get there, hold on. Every fan base has those group of fans that are more vocal than others, and sometimes we look at and we just go, "Oh, come on!" Like there's the buddy of mine that says, "You're like, oh, come on, man." Like Minnesota, the he's backing up guy sits right behind me. He annoys the crap out of me every single home duel. Iowa's got those guys that sit right behind the opposing bench, and they're not always the same guys, but they'll chirp. Some guys actually love the fact that they get some feedback. It only makes them go a bit more. I think a couple of them even have a podcast and they talk about it. And just there's a certain line. Don't chirp with the Hawk fans during a match. Just don't do it. It's not usually gonna end up good for you just because there's no win. There's no win there. I mean, if you're having fun with it, yeah, laugh, okay, make a joke, but don't, yeah, that's Carver Hawkeye 101 right there.
Yeah, and that's something you talk about throughout the week, and you talk about in the locker room before you head out there. Like, that's the thing. The environment you're walking into because you live in that environment in Rec Hall. You know what the Rec Hall fans are like. So when we go out to Carver Hawkeye or to Ohio State or wherever you go, it's like, hey guys, take care of business. We keep your focus inward towards the center. Don't look in the crowd. Don't make eye contact, and absolutely don't engage with the fans and start talking back and forth. So I say all that because I don't want to take any credit away from Kemmer because he looked absolutely phenomenal. But those are just a couple things I did pick up that I thought maybe Hall got out of his game a little bit. Maybe he looked ahead. Maybe he thought the duel was over after the Joseph loss. But then again, engaging in fans, when you engage in fans, you're not focusing on yourself for sure. And you're actually
Mission
doing exactly what
accomplished,
the fans
Carver.
are trying.
Mission
The
accomplished.
fans were baiting you in, and they accomplished. They feel, yeah. I'm I'm sure those guys behind the Penn State bench are like, we
Any
got to
advantage,
him.
that's
We
part of
got
getting
to him.
Carvered, right?
We helped win that dual meet, right? Yeah. So yeah, I mean that was just a lot of fun. I don't know if there's anything to that, but just from, you know, an old coach's eye, maybe something.
It's something perhaps to be mindful of. I mean, there's gonna be shifting of the focus. I mean, that's something we like to use a lot in headlines. It's, so and so shifts focus. Well, or, paying attention. Yeah, this is a legit situation where, yeah, probably gonna have to shift your focus going into that bout next time.
And typically, what we've seen, and I didn't pay a huge attention to this, but typically when the Penn State coaching staff is coaching during the dual meet, typically you'll see Cody on the bench for the lightweights. Casey's in back, like hanging with the guys in back. And then once 57, 65 comes around, you'll see Casey come out and start getting in the chair. You kind of saw all four guys in the chair. So that you didn't have a guy back kind of keeping a pulse on what's going on with the team. They were so you could see all the coaches on both sides of the bench were so locked into the duel that they really weren't paying attention to what's going on with your team during the match. Not that you should. I mean, you coach your guys how to act during the match. It's more than just how you train them to compete. It's how you act on the bench, how you balance yourself with each other. And I think that was a little different for Penn State this on Friday night that we normally see. Not to say that that wouldn't have happened with Hall, but yeah, it's a little departure from the Penn State staff about how they kind of divide up their coaching responsibilities, I would say.
Yeah, it's not something I was tuned in on. I mean, I'm aware of the chirping part of it, but yeah, that's not something. As obviously your experience with the program and the staff, you'd know that and be able to pick up on that. But one thing that, as we finished the weight, we had a lot of inexperience in these next couple weight classes. You had two true freshmen at 84. You had a redshirt freshman at heavyweight, another freshman. Actually, as Neville's technically considered a true freshman, I would assume there, even though he did take the year off. So of the last six wrestlers, four are freshmen, and the duel came down to this. And from my perspective, at 184 pounds, I thought Aaron Brooks won the match almost exactly how I thought he would. Just hit the attacks on his feet and made it his match. I mean, Abesad's is a bruiser. He's a guy who's also pretty good on his feet, but I just thought that the difference was that Brooks was a little better on his feet, and to me, that's where he won the match. Well, it's obvious that's where he won the match, but to me, that was the match, the game plan he needed to win this match, and he did. And kept Penn State in it going into the last 2 weeks.
Yeah, and this is a match where I really don't see the outcome changing too much. Not that Assad might not get him here. I mean, it's looking like they may face each other over the next four years quite a bit. So he may get him, but I don't see this one changing that much. I think, geez, how do you even rank this way? This is getting into tomorrow. Like, how the heck do you even rank outside of number one? Just kind of throw those guys out there, and they're all beating each other right now. But that's for tomorrow's podcast. But yeah, I to your point, this kind of held a form, kind of how we both saw it. I just thought, just like you, I thought Brooks had the advantage on his feet, and that's where the match was won, and that's where kind of they wrestled the match and kind of followed the script that we thought it was going to follow.
Yeah, I'm curious on what's going to change for both coaching staffs going forward here, because you found out what works for one, you found out what doesn't work for the other, and they're both well coached. And this goes back to also Cameron Mark Hall. What adjustments are going to be made for the next time these two match up? Because I think some of the issue at 84 is just the contrast of styles is so vast. And, we're seeing, Taylor, everybody looks at Taylor Venz as like the measuring stick. And then there's guys like Cam Caffey who come in and has a win over Abe Assad over the weekend. So it's one of those things where I think this weight class in the Big Ten specifically is just like, man, it's where your adjustments are going to be made, but you're going to have to adjust for one athlete. Well, this is that adage. You got to wrestle one match at a time, because there is, in my opinion, no mindset that can prepare you for the way that these wrestlers in the Big Ten compete from one match to the next, because you have literally no idea who I mean, it's easy to say you're going to have no idea. I don't think anybody's going to know what's going to happen from one match to the next when we get to the conference tournament. So preparing your wrestlers for this one's going to be one that's going to be a lesson in how to coach and how to prepare your athletes successfully. So I'm curious, because I just, like I said, I think Brooks is that much better on his feet here. And like I said, you don't see that changing. I don't see that changing with this matchup, but that doesn't mean, again, that Brooks can't lose to a guy who Abe Assad beat. We've already seen that happen once this year.
Yeah, I mean, typically when you're going into a tournament, I would say most coaches game plan for the semifinals and the finals. They're like, okay, these are the guys, they're going to give us problems. Not that we can't beat them, but we've got to spend a little bit more time breaking them down, getting an understanding of what he does, what his tendencies are, what your tendencies are, where we can exploit him. But at 184, it's like you better have a game plan round one through the finals, because each match is going to be different. There's so many contrasts in styles with these guys. Yeah, I mean, seeding is not going to matter at the NCAA tournament. Styles are going to dictate who advances over seeding at 184. So it should be interesting to see how it goes. But yeah, I don't really, this one, I don't see changing that much.
And I don't see 97 changing right now either, unless Rashid does something, because there's zero offense coming from him. I mean, just zero. And, you know, just zero. I don't really know what I can even say about this match other than just it wasn't a surprise. It was just I don't see that gap closing unless something happened. There's got to be some type of miraculous improvement in his health. I don't know what the problem is, but right now I want Shakur Rashid to wrestle better. I want him again. I said it last week. I want him to be that crazy crossface cradling machine again. And you touched on about having that pop on the step. It's just now the discussions is Michael Beard laying in wait now? Is this a we're still going to make a run at this championship? And right now, I don't see Rashid scoring a whole lot of points. Right now he may be in trouble even trying to maybe qualifying a weight class for the conference. So I just don't. I'm not surprised. I'm kind of disappointed as a wrestling fan. I just want to see. I wanted to see better out of this. And again, against injuries are real things, and I don't want this to seem like I'm chastising somebody for being hurt, because I get if we want more as a wrestling fan, and that's kind of where I put this match. It was just like watching it was ho hum to me, and that's really all I got to say about it.
Yeah, rooting interests aside, I don't think even the most hardcore Iowa fan, you don't want to see somebody go out not their best. And we've seen this at a number of times. I mean, Rashid's dealt with injuries, throughout his career. And at what point do you reach your breaking point? I mean, that's kind of the first time, up until Friday night, I'm like, hey, he just needs more time. I know he's not going to look good. I know he's not going to look perfect. Not many guys do coming right out of the gates from an ACL. And I'm like, okay, give him some opportunities. But we haven't even seen incremental growth in him he's been in the lineup, 3 weeks now? So, I mean, if I'm the Penn State staff, where do you hit the red button? Like, high alert, we have a problem. Do we need to make a change? And it's getting to that point where you think, okay, we still have a month. We still have a month. I believe he can get back, but can he actually? I mean, just realistically, based upon what we've seen from Rashid, there's got to be conversations going on. I can guarantee that there has to be conversations. You don't see that, and I'm sure there are conversations directly with Rashid. Like, you don't want to put any more pressure on the kid because he's fighting his own mind right now. He's fighting his body. He's fighting his mind. Nothing's coming easily to him. So you want to give him confidence, but where do you give him confidence at this point? There's not been a lot of things that you can point to in the last 3 weeks. It's like, hey, I know we're not clicking in these other areas, but hey, you're doing this really, really good. I don't see him doing much of anything very well right now, which is a shame because, man, when this kid is clicking, he's so dynamic, right? He's so fun to watch. I mean, he's a guy, again, rooting interests aside, the way he wrestles when he's at his best, he's just an entertaining guy to watch. And we don't see that right now. Literally looks like a shell of himself. Is the answer beard? I don't know. But that's got to be, every decision is critical now, because I think what was supposed to be separation between these two teams, they seem a lot closer together after Friday night.
Yeah, especially with the way tournaments are scored too, because it's again, it's not you versus the other team in the tournament; it's you versus the field, and the field can be your friend one match, your enemy the next. So again, I don't want to make it an indictment on Rashid, because again, this is a guy that's going to do. If you've read about what he's got going on off the mat with his business dreams, and he's setting himself up to be very successful after his wrestling season ended, and he got an extra year. And a lot of these extra years, they want to be there. They absolutely, they're not applying for a sixth year if you don't want to be there. And that's the one thing I think it's probably the most heartbreaking about this from a wrestling perspective. Is like, we all want him. We all want the A game, Shakur Rashid. I think outside of his opponents who don't want to see the A game Rashid, but I think just from a fan perspective, you just want to see it. And unfortunately, we haven't seen it yet. And I hope there's at least a glimmer of hope that we do see it, but right now it's not looking that way.
Yeah, and you know what, JB, we've talked about this in the past on the show, that, and from my personal experience, I've not seen many sixth years play out in a positive way for a lot of guys, just because this sport is so brutal. What these athletes have to endure week in, week out for 5 years straight. I mean, even the guys that haven't sustained a significant injury are altered fundamentally for the rest of their life after going through this sport at the collegiate level for 5 years. Now you factor in a guy who has sustained significant injuries, and you add a sixth year. Man, and we've seen it with both Penn State guys getting their sixth year with Kassar and with Rashid. Just I know Kassar wasn't in folk style, but how much more can that shoulder sustain?
Throw Kyle Cannell into
right?
that discussion too. I mean,
Throw Kyle Cannell, all of them.
Well, and
right?
one thing you bring that up, I think I'm trying to rack my brain, and I'm sure if I actually spent time looking at the 6-year guys that have hit the podium, Willie Miklas was a 6-year guy, hit the podium after a transfer to Iowa State, and off the top of my head, he's like, in recent memory, I'm sure I'm blanking on somebody. If I'm sure I am, but he's the one that I know that jumps out at me. And other than that, I'm like, okay, who else? That's making is anybody making title runs in year 6 outside of Stevan Micic, who's going to be 50 by the time he graduates?
Yeah, and it seems appealing at the time, like, oh, we can get you an extra year. But yeah, I have never, from my coaching experience, I've never seen it work out well. It never worked out well. And I think this is the case. I think, at the end of the day, when you're looking at Beard and you're looking at Rashid, I think probably the Penn State staff is like, Rashid's got the edge in danger, right? It's like you can slap on that cradle and pin some guys. Like, so even if he doesn't place, if he gets a couple pins at the NCAA tournament, it's like getting another win in the tournament. But we're not seeing much on top. We're not even, yeah. And in the limited time opportunities we've seen him on top, he doesn't. I mean, guys are getting away relatively easy against him, and typically that's the last place you want to be. But now guys, they don't have that fear in their mind with Rashid on top right now. So yeah, I feel for the kid. I mean, that's not the way you want to see a kid go out. Hopefully he can turn it around. I don't know, JB. At this point, I think it's a real head scratcher because you don't want to make the wrong call. But man, I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't know.
well, I'm sure those are discussions that are going on in State College. And as we move to heavyweight, the 7-0 win by Tony Cassiope, that locked up the duel, won the duel for Iowa. I'm looking at your projections, and I'm like, you know what? Dernlan's going to get this thing right as we go to it, because you had Neville's winning this one. But one thing about this match, and we knew that they were both athletic, big guys that could move, and that scramble where it was, I got your leg, well, now I got your leg, and then Cassiope finishes it. I was like, that was one of the best heavyweight scrambles in folk style wrestling I've seen in some time. And those two guys are freshmen. We're going to get to see them do that again. It was one-sided, 7-0 for Cassiope. You got he controlled the match start to finish. But again, there's that ability that we talked about with Seth Nevels and being able to get there and scrap and score. Well, he didn't score, but to be in there and scrap and put himself in the positions. I think if his foot is maybe a size 14 instead of a 13, perhaps, he might have finished that trip and kept Cassiope from coming around, and nearly just hipped him, pounced him, and nearly like I'm looking at him going, he's going to pin him from this. And Neville's bailed out and gave up just the two. And that scramble to me was like, that was the moment. It's like, duel's over. I mean, at heavyweights, it's, like we said, a one move match, but at that scramble, I'm like, oof, that's it. And that was, to me, that was one of the best action sequences in the entire match, if not, the best heavyweight sequence of the year. And Tony Cassiope he's fun to watch too as a heavyweight. So I have nothing more to write home in my perspective here, other than it was a solid heavyweight win by Tony Cassiope. I don't know how much the gap's going to change from a 7-0 match. I think, Cassiope is a freshman, a redshirt freshman is that much ahead of a very good Seth Nevels right now. We'll see, again, back to the drawing board, see what Seth Nevels has got to do to mitigate some damage and put himself in positions to, when he's got a leg on a big man like Cassiope, you finish. So it's not 7-2. You're all of a sudden that changes the whole outcome of how you're resting the match. So again, don't really have a whole lot to throw in here as we're approaching 50 minutes talking about one duel. We've still got a really good one with Nebraska and Ohio State to touch on too.
Yeah, I mean, number one, I'll just say I'm an idiot. Cassiope's not losing to this guy. And I actually think Cassiope's a title threat after watching this. Like, I've been impressed with him. I thought Neville's had a little bit more. He didn't have an answer. That gap ain't closing anytime soon. So I am big enough to admit I'm an idiot. Cassiope is really, really, really good. I think he is in the hunt to win this thing. So yeah, all the credit to him. I did think, after the Joseph match, I'm like, I think I might have picked this right. I think Penn State's gonna edge them. But credit to Iowa. And that's the thing. I mean, that's the thing, that if you're Tom Brands and the staff is like, what are we going to do when our backs are against the wall? Because they haven't been challenged or tested at all this year. And that's the one thing that that they wanted to have. Both coaches like, we have to go through a war. We have to challenge ourselves mentally, physically. Let's see what we are when we're put to the test. Let's see what our colors really are, because everything's been looking really good when things are going our way. How are we going to respond when things don't go our way? And they had a number of things not go their way and a lot of unexpected outcomes. And they found a way to get it done. So if I'm Tom Brands, like, hey, come Big Tens, come NCAAs, when we're put in the fire and we're put under duress like we were on Friday night, our guys are going to step up. I don't know who's going to be that step up guy that's going to perform and take the reins and lead us to victory, but somebody's going to. And we saw that from so many guys on both sides. But on the flip side of that, as much excitement as Penn State fans have to have after Friday night, thinking we're in the mix, you know what? You had the same opportunity. You had the match in hand. You had a 3-time national finalist, national champ. All you have to do is take care of business, and you didn't take care of business. You had, I know we're not seeing a perfect Rashid, but this is a senior All-American facing a guy, probably the most criticized guy in Iowa's lineup, right? With Jacob Warner. And Warner found a way to get it done. So credit Iowa. If I'm Penn State, I'm like, hey, we had the match in hand. Would you want a better scenario saying we win 174 and this match is ours? If Penn State had that scenario on Thursday or any scenario during the week, if it came down to 174, winner take all 174, they would have taken that scenario in a heartbeat, and it didn't happen. So I think a lot of people are saying Penn State should be even more optimistic at their chances of possibly winning, where I'm thinking there are probably more questions on their mind than they thought that they were going to have in such a close match.
Yeah, it's definitely created a little bit more drama than a 50-point gap like some people were looking at in tournament points, just a month ago. So, again, dual meets don't determine the national title, but they do make things a little bit more interesting when it comes to the rankings and things to talk into going into now February. Conference tournaments are going to be winding down. We got 29 days of February. It's a leap year, yay. So a little bit longer month to talk about wrestling. But I've been talking about that Nebraska-Ohio State duel. Came down to the wire. Oh, man. Isaiah White gets the fall in short time. It was going to head to overtime. It was, we got team points lost, which is just completely stupid. I'm going to touch on that before we get to the actual match. So we had a team point lost after Michael Labriola got a win in sudden victory. I believe it was sudden. Oh, it was late in regulation. Spikes his headgear in celebration. Team point. Isaiah White gets a fall, wins the duel. Team point. So instead of 21-14, it's 19-14. And again, Dan Lobdell, a.k.a. the Wrestling Nomad over at Flow, has been beating this drum for more than 1 year, and I'm going to give him the credit for really kind of carrying the torch on this. Matt, as a coach, it's got to be time to stop taking away the points earned by the athletes because of something as innocuous as a coach stepping a foot over a circle or, something celebratory. I mean, for so many years, it's like, shake your hand and walk off the mat. Guess what? We're not that type of sport anymore. We need that emotion. We need that celebration. I mean, what are 1,700 people sitting there going, hell no, they're standing up, they're cheering, they're screaming. Why should the guys be any different? Why should the athletes be any different? Why should they not be storming the mat, carrying their guy off? There's students rushed the mat at Arizona State. Maybe they were docked the team point. I don't know. But the opportunity to bring our sport into the freaking modern era of being exciting, well, let's celebrate that excitement. So the time to lose team points for celebrating your teammate and your match procedure, you've got to shake hands if you interrupt that. I mean, I think one point last year at the Division IIIs, they were looking at that rule where guys were jumping into their arms of their coaches after winning in the All-American round, and they were losing team points for it because they did it before the handshake. Thankfully, they got rid of that before it happened at the conference tournaments in the D1s. But come on, it's time to stop docking the team points for celebrating. Now, if you're over the top and you're like, trying to drop your crotch on your opponent's face, okay, that's a different type of suspension. That's a different type of penalty. Team points, Nomad, I'm with you there, man. It's time this has got to go. This has got to,
without a doubt. And let's be clear, they were celebrating with their team.
Yeah, this was not a taunting thing.
It's not like that. Yeah, I have a problem. If he's looking to Ohio State's bench, he's pointing at that. He's giving him whatever. He's flexing on the other team.
How many team points, man? How many team points were deducted when Kansas State basketball and Kansas had that melee at the end of the game last week? How many team points were deducted? Zero. Matter of fact, they made them go back on the court to finish the game for the last second or two because apparently, there's this thing with Vegas and gambling that the game has to hit regulation or something like that. I mean, something is ridiculous. People were throwing chairs, like legit non-kayfabe, throwing chairs, and not a single team point was deducted. Yet, yes, and you spike your headgear in celebration. Oh, no, come on. I hate to compare us to basketball, but I mean, there's a bench clearing brawl, no team points deducted.
I mean, sports are emotional. These athletes literally dedicate their entire life to compete at this level and to have opportunities like Nebraska versus Ohio State, the best against the best, 3 versus 6. Those are the opportunities you dream for. And then you've got matchups like this, 6 versus 7, right? 6 versus 7 or 7 versus 8, Labriola versus Romero. That's a big time match. There's emotion there, especially the way the matches are determined, right? And yes, let them express themselves. This is a good thing,
I even tweeted last night that I think Nebraska lost another team point when Shakira was performing gyrating her hips at halftime because, I mean, it's like, seriously. I mean, to me, that as awesome as this dual meet was, that overshadowed the whole thing for me. That it really did. That left the whole sour taste in my mouth. I mean, yeah, we had really good head-to-head matchups. We had really tight matches. We had, again, gritty. Isaiah White looked like he may have gotten dinged up in that match and comes through and he's trying to ride it out. Okay, he's going to go into overtime. Isaiah White's a good, you give me a 30-second sprint with Isaiah White, I like my chances. Well, didn't even do that because he's like, oh, I got the takedown. Oh, guess what? I got the fall, match over. I mean, what if he needs the fall to win the duel by a point and then they celebrate and then they lose a point and end up going to criteria or something like that? It's just the ridiculousness of team point deductions. Again, that honestly, it overshadowed the dual meet for me. It really did. Even though the team still won, there's still a 5-point spread. Just that whole thing. One of the officials, even on Twitter, goes, it's a stupid rule that was applied correctly or something like that. It was just, come on.
Yeah, and I think it's what Tim Shields is in charge of the officials now, the head of officials, and then Chuck Barbie is the rules interpreter. I mean, you got to look into that. I mean, it's one thing.
But are they going to look into it until these matches actually mean something beyond the 2,000 to 14,000 people that show up? It's the thing. The outcome is great. It doesn't progress your season anywhere. It doesn't. You got a Big Ten dual meet title that you can kind of share because not everybody wrestles each other. So I mean, if this happens in a I don't even know. I don't know what the answer is. I just think that there's always been something bigger that's comes up in the rules meeting that this always gets kind of pushed aside. If it's even been brought up, hey, coaches out there, bring it up. That's what the convention's for. Freaking do something about it. Can't just be us bitching.
And again, the refs are bound. They're supposed to follow the rules. We referenced that at 133. Serchinsky called it. He called it. But this is like, do you really want to be bound by the letter of the law? I know what the law says, but come on, use some discretion there.
Yeah, this is a rule that should have gone out in the 50s. We've had rules that have come and gone in the sport of wrestling. This one, should have been eradicated from the rule book years ago.
And I think a lot of rules, they're put into legislation because they're based on the worst possible scenario, right? It doesn't take into, this rule is kind of making sure that athletes follow general sportsmanship guidelines. But when you're celebrating with your team, that's what you want. You want to celebrate as a team. It's much different. Like I said, if he's pointing to the Ohio State bench or flexing on the Ohio State bench or talking some trash to the Ohio State bench, there was nothing like that going on. It was just, why are you pulling the joy, sucking the joy? There's not a lot of joy in this sport. With what we have to do, the way we train, the way we sacrifice, the way we got to manage our weight, the lifestyle we have to live, there's not a lot of joy in this sport. And
we don't get to eat Thanksgiving or Christmas.
Right. So let
us have this.
So we're taking the joy out of winning. I mean, come on. It just doesn't make sense.
Yeah. I think we can unpack the duel on tomorrow's episode because I think if there's a lot of stuff to unpack here with Nebraska and Ohio State. We've had Luke Pletcher look phenomenal. It sets the table for that Nick Lee match in 2 weeks. So I'd say that this is a logical place. We've got our soapbox moment. We've analyzed Penn State and Iowa. We think deduction of team points, like I said, tip of the cap to Nomad on really carrying that torch for the last several years. As a matter of fact, he's been a lot more vocal about it this year, and I think there's actually a support for it now because we're seeing team points deducted I can't say that they've been deducted at a higher rate, but it just seems like it because now we've actually have a little bit more of or more of eyeballs on it. So again, stupid rule. We have ways to change bad rules, and let's do that. Wrestling community, coaches, let's do this. Let's get rid of this stupid rule. Matt, anything else to add as we close up here? 121 of the RUDIS Wrestling Podcast.
121. Yeah, no, I got nothing. We got plenty more tomorrow. I mean,
yeah, well, like I said, we'll unpack Nebraska, Ohio State some more. Talk about the actual matches rather than the fun police ending the duel on a sour note. We've also got some pretty good crowds out east. Virginia Tech won a pair. NC State and Pitt had a top 10 bout. And Oklahoma State and Missouri had a good bout with the number one guy going down there. And we didn't even touch on that. We'll get to that tomorrow on episode 122 of the RUDIS Wrestling Podcast.